Welcome back to Askewed Reviews, and this week we are doing another franchise, and it is one where the newest film comes out at the end of this week. And we are doing the 1981 action adventure Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Here is your trivia question for today. What is the crate number or the wording that appears on the crate that the Ark is put into at the end of the film? The answer will be at the end of this video. So our film starts off somewhere in South America during 1936, and we meet our adventuring archaeologist, Indiana Jones. We watch as Indiana Jones deals with all sorts of traps, eventually gaining the idol that he is after. However, though, we also now meet Renee Belloc, an individual who keeps showing up and taking everything that Indiana is after. Indiana Jones does eventually make it back to the United States, where we discover that he is also Dr. Jones, who is a professor at a college. Now, while back at home, he finds out that the Nazis are after a particular item known as the Ark of the Covenant. Indiana heads off to Nepal in hopes of finding an item that can help him discover the location of the Ark. He finds the item in the possession of Marion Ravenwood, an ex-lover of his, and while the two of them are reuniting, Nazis show up. Now, the two of them are able to escape, and they run off to Cairo, where hopefully a friend of theirs named Sala will help them find the location of the Ark. It's around this time that we discover the Nazis have their own friend in the form of Belloc, and now it's a race as to which group will find the Ark of the Covenant first. So what's interesting is this movie may not have existed if it weren't for Star Wars A New Hope. You see, whenever George Lucas would release a movie, he would always take a vacation, so he was not around for the fanfare. Now, this particular vacation, he went to Hawaii and was actually hanging out with Steven Spielberg. Spielberg mentioned that he actually wanted to do a James Bond film. Lucas mentioned that he actually had a more interesting idea for something called Raiders of the Lost Ark. Which, by the way, it actually was originally known as just Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it wasn't changed to Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark until 2008 to match the rest of the films in the series so far. Also, one particular thing I find highly amusing, apparently Spielberg and Lucas were actually building a sandcastle as they were talking over this idea. Can you imagine walking by and seeing that? Now, George Lucas got the name Indiana from his own dog of the same name. This is also a joke made in the third film. Now, Lucas originally wrote it as Indiana Smith. It was actually Spielberg who suggested something else like Jones. There was also a few issues that the film ran into. Number one, they almost didn't get to film the Well of Souls sequences in the studio they wanted to, as Stanley Kubrick was using that area for the Overlook Hotel in The Shining, and he was way over his allotted time. The second reason is while they were filming in Tunisia, nearly every single person got food poisoning in the cast and crew. Really, only Spielberg didn't because he actually brought a ton of SpaghettiOs to eat while there. When it came to the look of Indiana Jones, the costume was mainly based off of Charlton Heston's character in The Secret of the Incas film. And as for the bullwhip, there were over 30 different whips used in the film, and they were from lengths of 6 feet up to 16 feet. Now, I really can't imagine anyone else doing as good of a job as Indiana Jones than Harrison Ford, but there were quite a few other actors up for the role, including Tom Selleck, Sam Neill, Sam Elliott, Paul Le Mat, Christopher Guest, Bruce Boxleitner, Barry Bostwick, Mark Harmon, Nick Mancuso, Peter Coyote, John Calvin, Michael Biehn, Sam Shepard, and even David Hasselhoff. Now, I really did enjoy Karen Allen as Marion, but some of these other actresses I could have seen in the role as well. For instance, Jane Seymour, Barbara Hershey, Lisa Eilbacher, Mary Steenburgen, Amy Irving, Dee Wallace, Valerie Bertinelli, Linda Pearl, Patty D. Arbenville, Michelle Pfeiffer, Deborah Winger, and Sean Young. Paul Freeman was great as Belloc, but a few other actors up for the role were Jonathan Pryce, Jacques Dutronc, and even Giancarlo Giannini. John Rhys Davis does such a great job as Sala, but apparently the character was originally going to go to either Danny DeVito or Kevork Malakian. Kevork was lucky though, as he got brought back to appear in the third film. Tot was played by Ronald Lacey, but it almost went to Michael Sheard, Klaus Kinski, or even Roman Polanski. Michael Sheard actually was also brought back for the third film as he played Hitler. This film was actually Alfred Molina's first feature film that he appeared in. Pat Roach was a British wrestler that actually got to appear twice in the film as two characters that died. He was the Sherpa near the beginning that got burned in the actual bar, and he was the Nazi mechanic who got chewed up by the plane propeller. So there is a small sequence in the film where they get a monkey to do Heil Hitler. The way that they got his arm up like that is by dangling a grape on a fishing pole. And the little monkey voice that sounds like he's kind of saying the actual words was done by the voice actor Frank Welker. This was apparently practice for him, as eventually he would do the voice of Abu in Aladdin. Tot was originally going to be a very different character, as these sketches show that he was going to have a mechanical arm that could double as a machine gun and a radio antenna that was attached to the side of his head. Also, in case you're wondering how they got his head to melt in the film, it was actually a gelatin and plaster mold under a heat lamp. In the Well of Souls, they actually used 7,000 snakes. There was also quite a few cut up hoses that filled in the extra spacing. The only poisonous snake that they used was the cobra. Now, none of the actors had any issues with it because anytime they were close, there was actually a glass wall in between the two of them. But the cobra actually did manage to kill a python, unfortunately. The giant boulder that appears in the film was actually completely comprised of fiberglass and was actually 22 feet in diameter. Now, did you happen to notice that the same sound effect used for starting the airplane is the same sound used for when the Millennium Falcon's engines are failing? Also, speaking of Star Wars, both R2D2 and C3PO show up as hieroglyphics in the Well of Souls. This is one of my favorite pieces of trivia. Apparently, the reason why Indiana Jones actually shoots the guy with the sword is he was originally going to be using his whip, but Harrison Ford was so sick from the food poisoning that he just asked, "Hey, can I just shoot the guy?" The girl having I love you written on her eyelids was actually decided the night before shooting that film scene. So Harrison Ford was just as surprised as the rest of us to see that. Indiana Jones being dragged behind the truck is supposed to be an homage to the film Stagecoach, where a very similar sequence happens. Melissa Matheson and Harrison Ford were married while this film was being made, but she actually showed up quite a few times on set to work with Steven Spielberg, as the two of them were screenwriting the movie E.T. Now, if you can't get enough of Indiana Jones, you've got lots of options. There's, of course, the other films, including the new one that's just about to come out. There's a television series that you may have either known as The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles or The Adventures of Young Indiana Jones, starring Sean Patrick Flannery. There are tons of options when it comes to books, and of course, lots of options when it comes to comic books. Lots of different video game options, even including a Lego version, multiple board games and card games. There's even a tabletop role playing game. I'm not sure if it's still there, but there is a Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular at Disney World. And of course, tons of Indiana Jones references that continue to show up in pop culture. Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark is definitely one of the best action adventure films I've ever seen. And I'm going to give this movie a 5 out of 5. As for the trivia question from the beginning of the episode, what is the crate number or the wording that appears on the crate that the Ark is put into at the end of the film? As the Ark gets wheeled away into some secret facility that the government owns, we see that it says Top Secret Army Intel 9906753, do not open. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews, and if there's a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments. And as always, like, comment, share, and subscribe.